Hello everyone! Today, I wanted to try something different. Something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I thought, why not now? I've been thinking about this ever since I watched the What If Sora Died in Kingdom Hearts 1, and a lot of the story really relies on Kairi being sent to Destiny Islands. So, I had a thought, what if she didn't? I would like to thank my friend, Shown in Shadow, for helping me make this video. We ended up debating a bunch of different scenarios until like 2 AM, so I greatly appreciate his help. Now, I feel like it's important to point out that the reason why Kairi ended up on Destiny Islands to begin with is because of the spell that Aqua placed on her on Birth by Sleep.
I just cast a magic spell on you. One day when you're in trouble, the light within you will lead you to the light of another. Someone to keep you safe.
Thanks!
Now let's say, hypothetically, she never met Aqua, and the spell was never cast on her. Where would she end up? We could say she gets sent anywhere, but where she's sent is rather important since her heart would be sought out by Ansem in Kingdom Hearts 1. Depending on where she goes is important enough that I'll probably end up making two videos, one where she ends up being found by Ansem, and the other when she ends up in a world, like, far off, never found, possibly the world of non-reality. Although I probably would end up having to, like, do that later on once we have more information on non-reality. In fact, everything I end up saying might be proven wrong. Like, since we don't know what new characters are going to be introduced that end up, like, contradicting everything that I end up saying. Since Nomura really likes to introduce characters, like, later on, that end up being, like, the puppet masters of the previous games. But anyways, this is just for fun, so I figured, why not rack our brains a little bit and figure this out. Now, where would I put her? I'd say probably the most likely place for her to end up would probably be with everybody else on Traverse Town. We could say that since they share a home, she was possibly drawn to them. Now, what would her being there change? Well, at first, you would think Sora and Riku wouldn't know anything about the other worlds. But this scene in Birth by Sleep with Riku and Terra talking kinda shows us otherwise.
Hey, did you come from the outside world?
Huh? Why would you say that?
Because nobody lives out here. And I know you're not from the main island.
Smart kid. So how about you? What are you doing here?
Oh, my friend's dad took us out on the boat.
It's still likely that Sora and Riku would try to make a raft at some point, even though that doesn't really matter too much since they ended up not using it. Sora and Riku would probably end up noticing the darkness still swallowing Destiny Islands and rush to it, even if the raft isn't being made. So after that, things would probably go normally up until Sora ends up in Traverse Town. He would end up meeting the Radiant Garden crew, and the only difference is that Kairi would be there, but he wouldn't really think too much of it since she would end up being just another one of the exposition crew, just telling Sora, like, what the Keyblade is, and she would probably end up getting the knowledge of it from Leon. Sora would still have the Keyblade since Riku would most likely still fall to darkness on Destiny Island. Things would proceed normally until he ends up running into Riku again. Now the question is, would Riku join Sora since Kairi is no longer in the picture? In the original, Riku was obsessed with helping Kairi without Sora, and without Kairi having met them as kids, Riku may refuse to even help Maleficent and join Sora. Now, if Riku decides to join them and reject the darkness, the Keyblade would end up going back to him, since it only went to Sora because Riku was considered not worthy to wield it. Now we end up in a situation where Sora would be without the Keyblade and Riku would be taking charge. Now that Sora doesn't have the Keyblade, it's likely he would end up becoming another mage like Donald. All four of them would leave together, with Sora learning magic on the way. Once they all leave, Maleficent would likely be able to realize that Kairi is the Princess of Pure Light that she was looking for, and end up snatching her up when nobody's paying attention. And then since she has Kairi, her and Ansem would end up having all 7 hearts ready for when it's time to open the keyhole. Now the question is, how would they open the keyhole? With no Riku, Ansem would have no vessel to use the Keyblade. Would he try to take over Maleficent? He needed Riku's permission to take over his body, So would he be able to convince Maleficent to do the same? If I had to guess, he would probably persuade her by saying, like, maybe if he lets her in, she would have more power than she ever had before, and all she would need to do is try to take control of him when she's inside. And under those circumstances, I could see her probably giving in, thinking that she could probably easily overtake him, due to her overconfidence throughout the entire series. And then after that, Ansem would end up taking control of her body. And now that Ansem has a vessel and all 7 princesses, he'd probably be able to open the keyhole, but it's hard to say if he would be able to use the Keyblade of Hearts. Since Maleficent wasn't a Keyblade wielder, he may not be able to use it, but on the other hand, a blade without an owner, can it be used by somebody who doesn't have a wielder? In this situation, I would have to say he probably could, since Keyblades can choose their wielders. From this quote that I found from a Nomura interview regarding Lee obtaining his Keyblade, Nomura states, "In order to wield a Keyblade, the most important requirement is to be the owner of a strong heart, regardless if it's good or bad, and a strong heart is necessary. Right now, there are a lot of things that Lee wants to regain, and that desire is connected to the strength of his heart." If that's the case, I would argue a blade with no owner could easily choose a master, even if the person who it chooses didn't have a Keyblade to begin with. Once our heroes find out that Kairi has been taken, it's likely that Riku would suggest that they were taken to Hollow Bastion, since he had seen it with Maleficent. With Cid's help, the gang would rush over, only to find the final keyhole had been finished. With Heartless rushing out and darkness spreading way faster than it did originally. The original door wasn't complete because Kairi's heart was never used, but now this is way worse than before. With all 7 hearts, Ansem would successfully open the final keyhole, flooding Heartless through the hole, and I would assume something similar to this would happen. And as foretold, darkness prevailed, and light expired. Well, not exactly. We would still get this. His fake Kingdom Hearts would still be light, which would end up just still murdering him. Now we move on to our next few characters, Mickey and Aqua. With no Riku to defend, Aqua and Mickey would end up probably going to the door together. The Wave of Darkness wouldn't attack Riku, and Aqua and Mickey would probably end up taking care of it right there. Mickey would still need to stay behind to close the door since he has the Keyblade of Darkness, and Aqua would go through the door to close it from the other side. Once the door is closed, everybody would go back to their worlds. But one small problem with that, the final keyhole never closed, so darkness would still have flooded Hollow Bastion. All the Radiant Garden gang would end up in the world just filled with Heartless, and they'd be stuck there while the world falls again, and then end up being stuck in Traverse Town again after it falls. After that, funny enough, Aqua would end up right at Castle Oblivion like Sora did. She would get approached by Axel and find the castle had been taken over by the organization. Most likely, she would enter the castle to see what they were doing, and try to figure out exactly who are they. One major difference is Naminé wouldn't be there, since she was made by Kairi's heart being in Sora's body. And since that didn't happen, she would have never been created. And even if she was, it's unlikely she would have been able to affect Aqua anyways, since Aqua was never close to Sora, and Naminé can only affect people close to him. Axel would most likely stand by and watch as Aqua slowly makes her way through the castle, no diffing every member since she's way more highly trained than Sora was. Since she ends up in the castle, it's likely that Mickey would end up finding his way to the castle as well, similar to how Riku was. They would eventually meet up, and she would get approached by Diz and leave with them. I would say it's also likely that she would take Ventus with her, since the organization was using it as a base. And just for safekeeping, like, Diz would probably recommend that they would store him in a datascape. Now when it comes to the organization, we have a few new nobodies. The nobodies of Sora, Riku, and Kairi. Riku's nobody would be a completely new one. Kairi's would also be completely new since it wouldn't be even close to how Naminé was. But as for Sora, Roxas would probably still have been made from Ventus's heart. So he would most likely be the exact same. And he would probably still have the Keyblade, since he was made from Ventus's heart. Sora would probably still be wandering around as a shadow, similar to how he was in Kingdom Hearts 1. With that, we lead into Days, but I think I'm going to stop for here. I have a lot to think about for the next part, and I would need to kind of figure out where everybody would go. Would Ansem still try... What the fuck? Would Xemnas still try to make his fake Kingdom Hearts, or would he pursue Ven in order to try to make the Keyblade like Xehanort did? Would Roxas go into Ventus if he ended up being close to Ventus's body? A lot of things I need to figure out, but the next part would most likely go up to the end of Kingdom Hearts 3. If you have any ideas, feel free to tell me, send comments. If anything, you can even probably PM me in my Twitter. I'd be more than happy to read through it and talk to you about it. If you think I got anything wrong, feel free to call me a piece of shit and that your grandmother is better at Kingdom Hearts lore than me. Thank you again, Shonen Shadow, and feel free to check him out on Twitch. While you're at it, you may as well check me out on Twitch. I like to do a lot of Kingdom Hearts 2 randomizers. I tried putting Mickey in it, didn't work. Gonna try that again. But anyways, take care everyone.